I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Delivering a Secure Digital Workspace with Citrix Cloud. I'm going to hand things off to our featured presenter today. He is a consultant and a Master Citrix Certified Instructor, Mr. Halaf Haddad. Halaf, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mayan, and aloha kakahiaka, which is good morning in Hawaiian, or for those of you out on the East Coast, aloha awinala, good afternoon. Today we're going to talk a little bit about delivering a secure digital workspace with Citrix Cloud. Now, among other things, we'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about how we got here in the first place. And to that end, how Citrix solves that digital workspace problem with the security issues that it introduces. And as Mayan indicated, we will save some time at the end for some questions. Hopefully, we'll have enough time also that'll take you into the Citrix Cloud tool and show you a little bit as to what is already out there for you, some of the things that you might be familiar with already. Well, let's take a look first of all at how we got to this place of everybody working from home, including myself today. The traditional workspace for years has been a bastion of security and presence in the marketplace with the traditional brick and mortar. It was very easy to think in terms of security. We knew where the building was, we knew where people were, we knew where the data was. And if we wanted to ensure security, we put in some access control measures. Very, very easy to do. You'd hire the security team at the front door, check employee ID badges, or depending on what type of field you were in, anything a little bit more stringent. Inside of there was, of course, the soulless cubicle farm, complete with the overbearing boss and the ever-present TPS printer. And the cubicle farm just didn't, I mean, the reason that movie succeeded was because of how soulless and how frustrating and life-draining it was living under those fluorescent light bulbs in the afternoon hours, and it just was not a very, very happy thing. Well, as technology evolved, and I'm sure you've experienced, we're now in the age of the digital workspace, where we have this ability to work from home. Wait, I'm sorry, let me fix that quotation mark. Work from home, because it really doesn't matter where you work today. As long as you have a good internet connection, you can access your company resources from just about anywhere. And that's been the Citrix mantra for years and years now, is this idea that you can work from any device in any location at any time. So that any user, any device, anywhere, anytime has been the proposition that Citrix has offered. But with that work from home, we've seen an increase in 3 areas. I just want to highlight these for you real quick, and I'm sure you're familiar with these. First of all, there's been a surprising increase in productivity. When that first idea of telecommuting was floated 20 years ago, and people started thinking, well, actually 50 years ago, if you go all the way back to the greatest demonstration ever. But this idea of working from anywhere and being more productive, I think we already understand that, but it's been quantified in an Oxford economic study. It was determined that 96% of organizations say that digital workspaces actually help employees solve problems more creatively. Now, of course, you get out of that soulless cubicle farm, your creativity is bound to increase. And another factoid out of that same study showed that 87% of organizations say that their digital workspaces actually help them provide better customer service. Now, you know, like that old dairy commercial, a happy cow makes better milk. Okay, I just went there. I'm sorry. But kidding aside, the fact that people can be in a more comfortable environment and in a better mood, for, again, being out of those fluorescent lights, not having to deal with the stress of driving to and from work. It turns out that it's demonstrated quantifiably over and over again that telecommuters are more productive. In fact, 90% of organizations also say that digital workspaces help employees collaborate more effectively. And that's been a fun one to experience myself over the years as I've taught in the New Horizons Online Live. It's been fun to bring people from different parts of the country to collaborate on a course and share experiences, but not just the country, around the world. I've in my class here, I'm based in just outside of Detroit, Michigan, the most beautiful city in America, which, by the way, if you don't believe me, come on by. I'd be more than happy to take you around and show you this amazing place I left California for to call home over 25 years ago. That aside, though, the ability to bring people in from different perspectives, in our New Horizons Online Live classes, I've had students from as far away as Chile, the Czech Republic, India, um, Fairbanks, Alaska, which I know is not part of Canada, it's part of the United States, but still some pretty far out places who wouldn't otherwise be able to collaborate. So the productivity has been wonderful. Another surprising thing that improves or has increased has been morale. And again, for some of those same reasons stated. In fact, just yesterday on my LinkedIn feed, an article came up about a technical writer who has chosen to live in a rural area because, of course, when you do that kind of work, you can do that from anywhere. And so he and his wife chosen to raise a family in a very rural part of Nova Scotia, which is on the far east end. It's even past Maine, so it's on the far east end of Canada there. Interestingly enough, the company he works for is in Australia. And so the ability for him to choose to live where he grew up and yet work in a big city job is remarkable. And when you keep your employees happy, they are, again, more productive, the morale is higher. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. However, it's not all sunshine and roses, as you can well imagine, because after all, the shoe has to drop sometime, and here it is, the security threats. When we consider that we have gone from this very centralized security model to a very decentralized operation, a lot of things have gotten lost. We no longer have direct control over what devices people use, although we could mandate that. But of course, I think you know the problem. Once we do a company-issued laptop, should something happen to it, it's going to be company-required service, and that's going to be a few days out. If we put the employee on the hook for the laptop or the connectivity device, then they can own it and be responsible for it. But how do we enforce policies around the company data and the company proprietary information, applications, et cetera, and communications without owning the entire channel? We don't own the connection all the way to the employee's house or to the coffee shop that they might be working in that afternoon. And so therein lies the challenge in trying to provide a secure digital workspace. So we no longer control the location or device, and yet we're still liable for the data security and the application security.
Hello?
So, yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm not sure if you're trying to advance slides, but the screen is still the same.
Oh my goodness, I am so sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Oh, thank you.
Now we're on the secure digital workspace slide. So.
Okay, well, let me jump back real quick and let's go on. Here we go. So yeah, so there's a traditional workspace, there's a brick and mortar slide, and there's a cubicle farm. I'm just trying to give you that impression of that soulless cubicle farm. Many of you are suffering in that right now, and some of you have escaped it. And here's the overbearing boss and the TPS printer. So I know I worked so hard to find the actual printer model. It's a shame that it didn't come up the first time. Yeah.
Everything's looking good now.
Okay, great, thanks. So here's the work from home, and this is where I put the quotation marks around work from home because it doesn't really matter where we work. And then the idea of productivity, morale, and security threats all increasing as a result of this telecommuting or this digital workspace that we now have. So again, the challenge that we face is that we no longer control the location, we no longer control the device, and that we being the company is still responsible for data security and application security. So that's been the struggle, that's been the tension of how to resolve it. And a lot of great brains have been put to this problem. And so as Citrix has observed this, they come up with this secure digital workspace mantra and said, all right, well, we need to draw a perimeter. And so we'll go a little bit out of order here. Actually, it's not going to be too bad. I'm actually right. I'm fine. So the question of what do you need in order to extend the security of the workspace to the location of the worker? If we really want to give users this freedom or this emancipation from the cubicle farm, where how can we still maintain our responsibility for data security? And so we have to identify the areas, things like application delivery, okay, network security, right, and data storage, where we're going to hold all of this important data, and what about the endpoint management? Now, to be clear, these are areas that Citrix already has a good presence in, and that's why Citrix is able to tie all these together when providing the secure digital workspace. By having this holistic approach to say, all right, we do want to have the user wherever they happen to be, and we're going to extend a secure perimeter out to wherever they are, so that while they are in our ecosystem, while they are working with our applications and manipulating our data and communicating with other employees, we're going to ensure that that remains secure, and that anything outside of that is going to be maintained separately. And so Citrix has already got a lot of these tools in place, and has over the last few years integrated them to tell one story. And that's part of the whole Citrix rebrand as well. So you might be familiar with the application delivery piece, which has been known for years as XenApp and XenDesktop. Now it's being called Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. And again, to help tell the one story of providing a secure digital workspace. So we have the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, the network security piece in terms of having VPN access and single sign-on and a unified gateway. And those features provided by what used to be called the NetScaler is now called the Citrix ADC and the Citrix Gateway. And so that functionality is there as well. What about data storage? Where can we have users collaborate on data? And that is what you might remember as ShareFile, which is now being referred to as Citrix Files. You're seeing a theme here, and a large part of this rebrand has been driven by the secure digital workspace story. Instead of saying that we have these separate products, you have XenApp and Desktop over here, we have NetScaler over here, we have a Citrix solution to the secure digital workspace challenge. And so Citrix Files giving us cloud storage and enterprise cloud storage as well. That is integrated with Office 365, which I think just got renamed to Microsoft 365. Man, this is like the year of the rename. I'm trying to keep up with all of these. Yeah, and integration with that. Integration with Microsoft SharePoint, Exchange, a lot of integration points. And then finally, addressing the issue of endpoint management. How do I allow only secure devices, or how do I ensure that devices accessing my network or my data aren't bringing any threats with them due to non-compliant configurations, such as not running any updates or having missing anti-malware measures? And that's through a superset of Zen Mobile, a cloud-based solution known as Citrix Endpoint Management. So all of these pieces have been here, and now Citrix is bringing them all together. And the end result is an end user experience, which is now referred to as the Citrix Workspace. The Citrix Workspace allows you to bring everything that people need to be productive in one place. That single location that enhances user experience and productivity while still providing the security and control that you need in your environment. And it encompasses everything that Citrix delivers right here in one common platform. So as you can see from the screen, the screenshot here of an presumably iPad with the Citrix Workspace application running, see there's access to the applications, there's access to the desktop resources that you can see down below and behind in the lower left there, a files section, so we can get at our collaborative data. So everything that we could possibly need to work on can be presented from a single location. And then it has a common interface. That is, you would see the same interface whether you access it via your iPad, via your Android phone, via your Windows desktop or your Linux desktop. All the way across, it will look the same. So what does that do? That again increases security by decreasing the knowledge gap that your users have. Being able to access the content the same way, regardless of which device, which platform, and where you are, means that you have a consistent experience, and that's really, really cool. There's a universal search capability. It's a little bit, let's try this one here. Yeah, there we go. Here, there we go. Oh, wow, that works. Cool. All right. So up there, there's the spyglass or the magnifying glass, or as we used to say back in 5th grade, the ant fryer. And that's where we go to do a search, and that the universal search capability across all your apps and content. So again, the issue of findability, that is a real word. There's a Wikipedia article on it. The ability for users to find the stuff that they need. One of the great drains on productivity is a user's inability to find things. A large part of that problem has been exacerbated by the very thing designed to improve findability, which is folders. And that's why I refer to folders as the F word. All right, and we don't use F words in polite company, so we should try to avoid the use of folders. And I was like, well, how do you do it? Well, if you have a good enough search function that can find it based on a keyword, then you just throw everything in one container and you can pull it out. But what about access control? That's here as well. You can set up the access control, and that's where you can start to have a little bit more fun with this. That universal search capability, being able to cut across all your apps and content, helps connect users with the information they need in order to succeed at work, and that's really what it's all about. Another benefit of the Citrix Workspace with all of this integration is the ability to build what we call cross-app workflows. Another way of saying this is if we have integrated applications, for example, I have the secure mail client, and I can go through the secure mail client to get to my Citrix files and add one in and send the link over to someone and pass it around. So it's all here in one unified experience, and really, really exciting to see that. Let's see here. Okay, cool. And there we go. All right. So what of this integration? Well, here's an example of what the idea of access looks like. If we were to have one user there on the, where are we here? Down there we go. And this one user attempting to access different resources. If they're trying to access our enterprise web apps, for example, we see through the middle there, they would have to come through our Citrix gateway. And so there's some sort of a proxy solution, like an HDX proxy, where they authenticate on the outside, request the resource, and the gateway reaches in, brings the resource out, and then sends the session out to the user. So we can have that proxy. But then when they want to go access some other application, like a SaaS application, like Salesforce or something, then we'd have to go another direction. Or if we're accessing yet some other internet websites, it might have to go a third direction. So our access control is all over the board. And that becomes problematic, particularly if the user's trying to get at all of these things simultaneously, particularly while accessing our internal resources. So one issue here is, one piece here is the Citrix access control, where we can set up single sign-on and pull access to all of these resources into a single location, thereby giving us a little bit more control. So when you're on the company business, doesn't matter where you are, you're going to come in and connect through here and access your resources. Now, from that single sign-on, we really simplify things, particularly around single sign-on. If we set up the relationships with those SaaS applications, we make it so easy for the user that they just remember their basic credentials, username, password, and domain possibly, and from any device, log on and get the entire experience. So even though that's pretty simple, now I say, okay, well, what about multi-factor authentication? Well, if you want to add multi-factor, you've got that single point of access. You can add in multi-factor authentication. Here's the cool part. Because you're adding in multi-factor authentication at that point of entry, and you're doing that and having a unified experience, we no longer have to worry about how's it going to happen on a smartphone versus how's it going to happen on a tablet. It's the same unified experience all the way across. So it's really, really easy to maintain. More so, even as the users, once they've authenticated, they determine how to rearrange their workspace. We remember those settings on the workspace servers. So things like favorites and most recents, will follow them from device to device, which is pretty cool there. So this idea of transparent security from the employee experience, they just have to remember the one set of credentials, whatever it happens to be, whatever. There's some examples here like the password or fingerprint, facial recognition, blood sample. Wait, I don't think that's a factor anymore. I don't think that one ever took off. But anyways, yeah, so from the employee perspective, again, very, very simple, straightforward stuff. From the back end, and what we as IT professionals worry about is how secure are things? Well, there's FIPS compliance, the Federal Information Processing Standards. We can meet those with Citrix things. Containerized workflows. We have units of work that are performed beginning to end. Packet inspection and filtering all the way up at layer 7. That's a pretty important one. And that's a feature of the Citrix ADC called the application firewall or app firewall. And being able to look in at layer 7 data to see whether a malicious request is masquerading as a bunch of separate packets at layer 4. And that's one of the big distinctions between an application firewall and a traditional layer 4 services-based firewall. Layer 4 firewall is only looking at those port numbers. Layer 7 firewall is looking at is actually reassembling the request, looking at the original data and saying, oh, this looks like a SQL injection attack. Let's reject it, and doing that. There's also facility for regulating access to SaaS applications like Salesforce, and even collecting here at the bottom the Citrix Analytics. Now, analytics is a growing field. Obviously, every day passes, more data is being collected. It has to be analyzed. We have to learn from it. And there's just far more data for us to go through than we can on our own. And so that's where the machine learning and some of these automations really help with the learning. And so with Citrix Analytics for security, there are a number of things that happen under the hood there. Now, it's not one of those, if I told you I'd have to kill you, because quite frankly, I haven't peeked under the hood that deep yet. But the ability for Citrix Analytics to monitor your environment and, as you see, on a user-by-user basis, determine what users are most likely engaging in, say, risky activities, and assigning scores to them so that it can come up on a dashboard and say, you know what, let me check and see what this user is using. Or here's another example of the Citrix Analytics part of it. Suppose it's 3 o'clock in the morning and somebody is logged on and downloading 20 gigabytes of data from our share file site, our Citrix collaboration site. Now, why would somebody be up at 3 in the morning doing a massive data transfer? Especially if I am not a global company. If I'm simply a US-based company and I don't have any resources going off at other time zones, or I don't have a follow the sun data center, that could be problematic. And if that's something that has been learned about my environment, that could trigger an intervention of sorts. So tying the Citrix Analytics to the machine learning to observing the behavior of your environment, we can go so far as to say, hey, big download at 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe I should call someone. And so Citrix Analytics can send out a notification, possibly lock out the channel, maybe even reach across to the device doing the download and performing a selective wipe. So depending on how we build, the tools are there. So now, granted, something like that, automated security is a little bit nervous. You want to make sure it's done right. And so spending the time to collect the data, to analyze it, and understand what the rules are is a pretty important thing. This is where we want to draw a distinction between the negative security model and the positive security model. Right? With the positive security model, we're saying if the behavior matches what is supposed to be done, then we will allow it. The negative security model says if that's not what's supposed to be done, then don't allow it. The problem is it's a lot easier to say what should be done than a list of everything that shouldn't be done. Now, that's kind of an interesting, if you've been following computer security for the last 30 years, you'll have seen that we were trying with virus definitions, right? Virus definition updates, virus definition files, and we're trying to keep up with all the ways to do it wrong and then say, don't do that. as opposed to focus on a positive security model. And over the last 15, 20 years, they've been observing that, saying with heuristics and machine learning, saying, you know, this is what we want. Or knowing the behaviors of our applications and then setting that in motion at first and saying, that's what we want, and that's what we're going to allow. And if, as long as it matches our positive security model, then we'll allow it through. Now, the cool thing is that the Citrix security components bring both together. So they'll go with the positive as well as the negative. So you get the two layers there. So that's another big thing. But going back to that, the SaaS vendors, just a real quick one there with the Citrix experience. There's right out of the box with the Citrix Workspace integration with the top 50 SaaS applications. So in terms of integrating a single sign-on, you can authenticate to Citrix Workspace, and then Workspace will go and authenticate to either it is Salesforce, Dropbox, the G Suite, Office 365, and it will do the pass-through of that. So in terms of as you add other SaaS applications into your experience, you'll have your on-prem data, you'll have your on-prem applications, and you'll want to secure those. Then you'll have your cloud-based tools. And a lot of companies now, for example, with email, like we're tired of pulling our hair out over an Exchange server, which, by the way, I can tell you from experience, that's a bad stress management technique. Anyhow, so this move to Office 365, and then other tools, collaboration tools like Slack for real-time communication with teams, and all kinds of cool things like that. So Citrix already has that built in. Just connect to your company's subscription, and boom, single sign-on, life is good. Now, when a user signs on and says, hey, you know what, I'm missing that Salesforce icon. How do I get that? Well, we can also create a process where a user, through self-service, says, I'd like that Salesforce app, please. And it'll come to the service desk, and whether you require manual intervention or you perform some automated check, is the user a member of this group, will you then say, you know what, we'll go ahead and let you add that to your workspace experience and get the Salesforce. So that's a pretty neat thing with regard to what the user sees with the Workspace app. Now, there's always going to be the concern of, well, that's great. Now the user is working in the Workspace, and then the resources that they launch would be wherever they happen to be. There's a possibility then that if I am not mindful, I can set it up in such a way that if they open a standard browser and go out to the internet, then I lose some of that protection because it's not staying in my ecosystem. I'm not protecting. I haven't extended the secure digital perimeter around the user, and they've gone outside the fence line, so to speak. And so by enabling enhanced security, I can force all of that traffic to stay within my ecosystem and then allow it to go out to the internet, or deny it based on a rule. Or better yet, in some cases, redirect it to the secure browser service. Now, this is a really, really cool feature of the secure digital workspace that Citrix provides. In fact, the secure browser service is the #1 most widely used part or application in the Citrix virtual apps. And the way that the secure browsing service works is that when a user wants to access a website that's outside of our ecosystem, the secure browser service allows us to redirect them to a browser session out in the cloud. And from that browser session in the cloud, we reach out and connect to the questionable website, so to speak. If you observe down in the diagram there, you'll also note that the connection between the user and the secure browser service is not HTTP, but rather HDX, the Citrix proprietary protocol for accessing a desktop session. Now, why do you suppose that is? Well, quite frankly, it's so that the HTTP doesn't blow back into the enterprise network. By having two separate protocols to get where we're going, we have to have a deliberate proxy point which limits what data is actually being brought back. And with HDX, we're not bringing the web traffic back, we're bringing the screen display. And so we are protecting our enterprise network. So no matter what happens with that temporary browser out in the cloud, if something goes sideways, we just close the session, relaunch, not too worried about it. And so the secure browser service is a remarkably good feature. And as it says there at the bottom, you deploy in minutes with zero configuration. Again, as part of your Citrix Cloud subscription, you can add in the secure browsing service, and it goes rather swimmingly. All right. So one more look here. If with the Citrix Workspace, again on the left, you'll see the files only. On the right, the integrated view of the files along with the apps and the desktop resources all brought together. What you see on the left is what would have come through what we used to call share file, and then on the right is that integrated with apps and desktop resources, which had been originally provisioned via what we would call the Zen App and Zen Desktop service in Citrix Cloud. So looking at that in terms of a unified experience, the end user gets a unified experience, but as the IT administrator, you also have a unified experience. So what I'd like to do next is just pop into the dashboard here and show you. But before I do, how are we doing on questions? Do we have any questions?
You're doing such a great job, Halaf, that I haven't seen any come in just yet.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Thanks. All right. So what I have up here is I've already logged on to it. In fact, if you were to just go visit citrix.cloud.com, and I think I can put this into, no, I can't do that, can I? All right, but if you go visit citrix.cloud.com, there's an option for you to sign in and create a 30-day test account out here in Citrix Cloud. Now, with Citrix Cloud, what we're looking at is a place where we host all of our services that pull it together. With the cloud, we have such services as the gateway, so our single sign-on place, as well as our ability to present and connect users to resources. We have the secure browser listed here, and again, very easy to deploy. Just we share that out as another application. There are smart tools built into our subscription, which allow us to do things such as do smart deploys, do smart checks, and maintain health checks on our environments. And then this last one over here, the virtual apps and desktops service. Now, the virtual apps and desktop service is most like what you may be familiar with if you are coming to this from the world of Citrix virtual apps and desktops, or Zen App and Zen Desktop, if you will. Part of the challenge in extending that secure digital workspace out is to having all the resources available. Now, this gateway, the gateway piece down here, provides that secure access to the resource, but then the resources themselves have to come from somewhere. That's something that you will have to manage no matter what. Whether you continue to manage the resources in your on-premises data center, or whether you go to a public cloud such as Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. Those are the three that are being provided right now. We'll click the Manage button here and see if this comes up in any short order. I think I should have clicked it 30 seconds ago. But here it comes up, the Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. And this is where we would go to configure the resources that we want to make available. Now, in particular, we have here under the Virtual Apps and Desktop Service, right now I don't have any cloud connectors. A cloud connector is a service that has to be established at your resource location. So you'll see the word cloud connector connected with resource location. In fact, right here you do. Installing the cloud connectors will create a resource location with a default, yada yada. And so we would go through a process of installing the connectors, detecting them, and the like. But what that does is the cloud connector is the piece that acts as a proxy between your resource location, which would be your virtual apps and desktops implementation, and the cloud, so that when a user signs into your cloud subscription, we can present the resources to them. If I show you we have to manage a full configuration, and this is a new one. That's one of the things about being in the cloud is new stuff pops up all the time. All right, so let's click on full configuration. Now, again, those of you that are familiar with managing XenApp and XenDesktop on premises, you're looking at this and saying, wow, this looks vaguely familiar. And sure, this is what we call Cloud Studio. In fact, you see up here in the top left the words Citrix Studio, and it very much looks and feels like an MMC console, effectively just like a virtual apps session of Studio is what you're running. And through this, you would go through the process of setting up a hosting connection, which I don't have any right now, but if I had established a resource location and built a cloud connector, I would then come back with the credentials to that and show that hosting session. The resource locations would also show up here as zones. So in terms of creating that zone, those zone boundaries around my my resources, I could do that as well. You'll notice that there are a couple things that are not here. Actually, they just added that one back in, administrators. Yes, the one that isn't here is licensing. Citrix Cloud is a subscription-based service, and we do not have to manage license servers. We just have to manage subscriptions and pay the amount appropriately. But then as we get into things such as managing the machine catalogs. Now, again, I don't have a resource location, and I don't have a hosting connection, so I can't pull. I don't have a one to pull in and say, all right, let me go ahead. But if I were, I would be able to click the Create Machine Catalog, and it says no Citrix Cloud connector is found here, right? If it were, it would reach out to my resource locations and say, okay, I see that you've got these hypervisors and these resource locations. Which one do you want to work with? And then which one of those is the master virtual machine? And it would walk me through the process of building a machine catalog. And from here in the cloud, I can actually be creating virtual machines in my on-prem data center. Then, of course, what follows is the process of creating the delivery groups that assign the resources from those machines to specific users and groups. And then from there, I can manage the applications. So a very familiar interface from the managing the apps and desktops portion of it. As far as monitoring goes, this looks very familiar as well. This is the cloud version of Director. So if you're familiar with using Director as a monitoring tool, we have our dashboards there. We can look at our historical data anywhere from the last 2 hours to the last year, if need be. We can trend the logon performance and see how we're doing with an average logon duration. And if it's getting over 10 seconds, we can start thinking about some countermeasures to bring that time down. Other filters, if I want to look at specific machines and the like. But if you haven't explored Director before, this is a pretty cool, fun thing. So that's as far as managing the resources, right? Once we have created the resources, we can also publish them out as libraries, which I don't have any right now, but that's what that library one is. Wow, this has gotten really snappy. Really liking this. All right, so the identity and access management. This is where we would go to establish our connectivity to authentication options. So if I want to use an on-prem Active Directory, or if I want to use Azure AD, I can establish that. If I'm going to be doing multi-factor authentication, I could do on-prem AD and Azure AD. It's kind of funny because it's the same thing, two different ways. Delegating access, I could invite an administrator in. And through the domains, if I want to add an Active Directory domain, that would be part of the process of creating a cloud connector here. But one more thing we'll take a look at here is under workspace configuration. Now, as far as what the user will experience, the user will then, instead of going to a storefront server, as they would do in a traditional on-prem deployment, they would want to connect to this workspace URL. Now, a couple of things. First of all, that is a pretty big thing, so we'll just click the workspace URL, and I can change it to something else like WS demo 2019-0220. And it says, I understand that changes will take about 10 minutes, and that's for the DNS replication and whatnot, and that's fine. But I can come up with a much friendlier, much more memorable workspace URL. I can also create CNAME records if I really, really wanted to, and set that up. Now, in addition to going with the this for the workspace experience, the user will connect to it and authenticate. In fact, I'll do this here. Open link in new tab. And this is where I would then have to authenticate, but I don't have any domains to authenticate against. But you can see that this is the look and the feel for where it would go. So from here, we would log on, and then we would get this screen right here as we normally would. So that is a pretty nifty thing there. All right, so under authentication, I can choose which one I want. Again, how subscribers will see their workspace. So there's some customizations. I can choose some basic color scheme, add a logo, I mean, the exciting things in life. And I can also integrate here with the secure browser and other applications. So no sites added. Okay. So all in all, the secure digital workspace, Citrix has given us a number of tools to extend that. They've given us the application and desktop resources through those traditional Citrix virtual apps and desktops. They've given us the Citrix content collaboration or the share file experience to be able to have a cloud-based data storage to support that. We have networking tools to extend out there through the gateway, and we have this unified experience for the user through Citrix Workspace. Really, really cool stuff, and looking forward to it. I do want to leave you with a couple of links here. So for more information, if you want to visit, you've got the Citrix Digital Workspace page that has some good things. A little bit more about specifically the Citrix Workspace. So the Digital Workspace is more about the vision. Citrix Workspace is about the end user experience, and there's a link there. Now, both of these are topics that we explore a lot more thoroughly in our Citrix training courses. As a Citrix Authorized Learning Center, we provide a number of trainings on virtual apps and desktops, the ADC, formerly known as NetScaler, and all the other offerings. And the particular cloud offering is a CXD course, or course CXD 252, to moving to this service on Citrix Cloud with Microsoft Azure. And the link is provided below for you if you'd like to see when we have upcoming events. All right, and with that, I'm going to open it up to any more questions, comments, thoughts.
Thank you, Halaf. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type those in now, and we'll stay online for a few minutes to answer those. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes to do that. I also wanted to mention that if you're interested in any of the material that's presented in the webinar, please reach out to your local New Horizons Center for further information. If you're not familiar with your local New Horizons, you can log on to newhorizons.com and just do a zip code search to find a center that's nearest to you. And also, as a reminder, the session is also being recorded, and you will receive a link to view the session recording along with a PDF of the presentation today. So at this time, if you have any questions for Halaf, we'll stay on the line and get those answered. And we did have one come in. Halaf, what if you are using a secure browser and someone goes to the URL that requires it to be used in Chrome or vice versa? Can it redirect to another browser?
That's a great question. I've had that one come up before. I'd like to think that the secure browser service is standards compliant, but if it requires a specific browser, that I don't know. Well, first question out of the gate is a big old I don't know. Let's find out. Let's see, Citrix secure web browser. Well, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be Internet Explorer 6 in there, but what am I looking for? Oh. So it's web isolation. Yes, we get that clientless configuration, but technical. Ooh. All right. Yes, I don't have a quick answer to that. Next step, try secure content. What does it mean? Oh no, I won't want to do that. I have to set it all up. Okay. Yeah. The quick way I could think of testing it, which would take me a little bit longer than time we have, is to set up the service and then use it to go visit a website, useragentstring.com, and at least it would tell us what kind of a browser websites think it is. If you're familiar with that website, I'll show you here. www.useragentstring.com. All right. So yeah. So I am this particular browser window is Chrome, and it so indicates. But yeah. So did not run that test, but that's a great question. If Mike, I can follow that up.
Great. That's actually the one main question that we had for you today, Halaf. You did a great job explaining everything. But thank you so much again for coming on and speaking on behalf of New Horizons. We appreciate it. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you on another webinar with us. And you may now log off. Thank you.